grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But not all battles are fought with bolter and blade. Some wars are waged within, against memory, against guilt, against the ghosts of our own making. This is the ghost of Caliban, the story of the Dark Angels, the First Legion, and the truth they spent 10,000 years denying. A tale of loyalty, betrayal, and a homeworld that refused to die. I am Brother Librarian Samael, and what you're about to hear was never meant to be known. You're watching Voidborn. Subscribe, bear witness, and remember, the forest never forgets. They say the Dark Angels are the Emperor's first and most loyal legion, paragons of righteousness, who walk in the light of his divine will. They say, we are the unforgiven, forever seeking redemption for sins, 10,000 years, buried in the dust of a shattered world. They say many things about us, whispered in the dark corners of the Imperium, spoken in hushed reverence by those who know only fragments of our terrible truth. But I know what they do not say, what they cannot say, because to speak it would unravel the carefully woven tapestry of lies that keeps our legion whole. I know because I have walked through the corridors of the rock, that asteroid monastery fortress that drifts through the void like a tombstone marking the grave of our homeworld. I know because I have stood before the inner circle and heard secrets that would drive lesser men to madness. My name is Brother Librarian Samael, though that is not the name I was born with, and it is not the name I will die with. I am a keeper of forbidden lore, a wielder of the Emperor's psychic gift, and a witness to the event that would come to be known only in the most classified vaults of our chapter as the Ghost of Caliban incident. What I am about to tell you is not sanctioned by the Supreme Grand Master. It is not approved by the chaplains who guard our darkest secrets with Bolter and Crozius. This testimony exists in defiance of every oath I swore when I donned the bone-white armor of Deathwing, when I learned the truth about Luther's betrayal, when I gazed into the abyss of our legion's shame and felt it gaze back with hungry, knowing eyes. I tell you this because someone must remember what truly happened in the ruins orbiting dead Caliban. I tell you this because the ghost may return, and if it does, the Imperium must be warned, though I doubt they will listen, and I doubt they will survive if they do not. It began, as all our nightmares do, with a whisper from the past. It began with a voice that should have been silent 10,000 years. It began with Caliban calling her children home. The Vox transmission came through at 0300 hours shipboard time, crackling with interference that our tech priests assured us was impossible, given the sanctified nature of the rock's communication arrays. I was in the librarium's meditation chamber when the alarm klaxons began their mournful wailing, the sound echoing through corridors carved from stone that once formed the heart of our doomed homeworld. Master Ezekiel found me there, surrounded by hovering data slates inscribed with protective wards that glowed faint blue in the chamber's perpetual twilight. The chief librarian's face was a mask of controlled fury, his psychic hood crackling with barely suppressed energy that made my teeth ache, and the air taste of copper and ozone. Behind him, 3 interrogator chaplains followed like shadows given terrible purpose, their skull-faced helms reflecting nothing but our own guilty faces in their polished ceramite surfaces. Brother Samael. Ezekiel's voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor itself. The inner circle convenes. Your presence is required immediately. I did not ask why. One does not question the chief librarian of the Dark Angels, not when his eyes burn with the intensity I saw in that moment, not when the very air around him seemed to ripple with psychic pressure that promised violence or revelation in equal measure. I simply rose, deactivating my data slates with a thought, and followed him into the depths of the rock. We descended through levels known only to those who had proven themselves worthy of the chapter's darkest truths. Past the training halls, where neophytes learned the arts of war. Past the chapels where battle brothers knelt in eternal vigil before altars dedicated to the Emperor and the Lost Lion. Down, always down, into the cold heart of the asteroid, where stone gave way to older stone, where the air grew thick with memories of a world that died screaming. The inner circle's sanctum was a vast circular chamber lit by sickly green luminators that cast everything in the color of old nightmares and forgotten shame. 23 figures stood arrayed around a central hololith display, each representing the highest echelons of our chapter's command structure. I recognized them all. Supreme Grand Master Azrael, his face carved from granite and determination. Grand Master Belial of the Death Wing, bone-white armor gleaming like bleached bone. Samael of the Raven Wing, my namesake, his expression hidden behind a helmet he never seemed to remove. But it was the hololith that drew my attention and held it with the grip of sudden, terrible fear. The display showed a waveform, a pattern of sound captured and translated into a visual representation by our most sophisticated cogitators. It pulsed and writhed like something alive, like something that should not exist, but persisted anyway, defiant of logic and sanity. I could see corruption in those waveforms, patterns that hurt to look at directly, mathematics that bent in ways that suggested warp taint or worse. "Play it," Azrael commanded, his voice flat and emotionless in the way of men who have looked into the abyss so many times they no longer remember what light looks like. The Vox operator, a hooded serf whose augmetic eyes glowed red in the green-lit darkness, manipulated controls with trembling fingers. The chamber's speakers crackled to life, and then we heard it, the voice that would haunt my dreams for months to come, the voice that should have been impossible. Static washed over us first, thick and cloying like ocean waves dragging corpses onto a beach. Then, beneath the interference, words emerged, broken, fragmented, but unmistakable in their clarity and their terrible familiarity. "Walking, Caliban, once more." The voice was aged beyond measure, ground down by centuries of suffering and regret, but I knew it immediately. Every dark angel in that chamber knew it, because it was burned into our genetic memory, encoded in the very DNA that made us the Lion's sons. It was the voice of Luther, our greatest hero and our most terrible traitor, the man who had nearly killed our Primarch and shattered our homeworld in his pride and his rage. Luther, who had died 10,000 years ago in the cataclysm that consumed Caliban. Luther, who could not possibly be speaking to us now. The forests, remember, the lion walks. The transmission ended as abruptly as it began, leaving us in silence that felt heavier than any sound could be. I watched as battle-hardened veterans, men who had faced Chaos warbands and Xeno's horrors without flinching, exchanged glances of barely concealed horror. The psychic pressure in the room had tripled, every librarian present unconsciously broadcasting their shock and fear into the Empyrean. Azrael spoke first, his voice cutting through our collective dread like a power sword through flesh. Analysis confirms the voice print matches archival records of Luther recovered from pre-fall data vaults. Transmission origin point, the Perdition Moon, orbiting the Caliban debris field. The Perdition Moon. I knew of it, though I had never set foot on its cursed surface. It was one of dozens of rocky satellites that had survived Caliban's destruction, a barren wasteland of stone and regret that our chapter maintained a strict exclusion zone around. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. Not in the void's embrace, not in the shadow of our homeworld's grave. "This is sorcery," one of the interrogator chaplains growled, his voice distorted by his helm's Vox grill. "Warp taint. The Fallen seeks to deceive us with tricks and illusions, to draw us into ambush or heresy. Perhaps, Ezekiel replied, though I could hear doubt in his tone. Or perhaps something worse. Brother Samael, you are our most gifted farseer. What do your senses tell you? All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of their expectation, like chains wrapping around my chest. I closed my eyes, extending my consciousness into the warp space that existed beneath and behind reality's thin veneer. I reached out toward the memory of that voice, seeking its psychic signature, trying to discern truth from deception. What I found made my blood run cold. The psychic residue was wrong, not tainted by chaos in the usual way, no daemon stink, no corruption that made the soul recoil in instinctive horror. Instead, it was hollow, empty, like an echo of an echo, a shadow cast by something that had once been real, but now existed only as memory given impossible form. It's not a trick, I heard myself say, opening eyes I did not remember closing. It's worse. It's real. Or it was real. The voice belongs to Luther, or to something that remembers being Luther so completely that even the warp cannot tell the difference. The chamber erupted in shouted questions and denials, but Azrael's raised hand brought silence crashing down like a thunder hammer. Then we investigate, but only those who have proven their loyalty beyond question. Only those who know the full truth of the fall. His gaze swept across us, cold and calculating. Grand Master Samael, you will lead a Ravenwing reconnaissance force to the Perdition Moon. Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai will accompany you to test any souls we encounter for corruption. Brother Librarian Samael will provide psychic support and analysis. He turned to face the hololith, his back to us now, shoulders rigid with tension. Find the source of this transmission. Determine if it truly is Luther's voice, and if so. He paused, and when he continued, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. If so, find out what remains of him, and ensure it never speaks again. Dismissed, we filed from the chamber in grim silence, each lost in our own thoughts and fears. But as I passed through the doorway, I heard it, so faint I might have imagined it, a whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the stone that had once been Caliban's flesh. The forests are alive again, it breathed, in a voice that sounded nothing like Luther and everything like home. Preparation for our mission took 3 standard days, though it felt like it was far longer as I walked the rock's corridors and felt the weight of unspoken dread hanging over every brother I passed. Word had spread, as it always does, despite our best efforts at secrecy, that something was wrong. The serfs moved with nervous efficiency. The scouts watched us with eyes too knowing for their young faces, and even the battle brothers seemed to grip their weapons tighter when they thought no one was looking. I spent those days in the librarium, poring over ancient texts that smelled of mold and forbidden knowledge, searching for any reference to phenomena that might explain what we had heard. The archives of the Dark Angels are vast and terrible, filled with accounts of horrors that other chapters would consider apocryphal or heretical. We keep records of things that should be forgotten, testimony of sins that should never be forgiven. In the Tome of Atonement, sealed behind wards that would incinerate any unauthorized reader, I found a passage that made my hands shake as I turned the crumbling pages. It was written in High Gothic, so archaic that even my enhanced cognition struggled to pass the grammar, but its meaning was clear enough. When Caliban fell, the forests screamed, not with human voices, for the forests had never been human, but with the voice of the planet itself, ancient, terrible, aware. The lion's legacy was built upon soil that remembered every drop of blood spilled in the great beast's hunts, every oath sworn beneath boughs that had stood since before mankind walked upright. When Luther shattered the world, he did not kill it. He merely scattered its pieces, and in scattering, gave the consciousness of Caliban no single grave to rest in. The passage continued, but the next several pages had been burned away, leaving only charred remnants that crumbled to ash at my touch. Someone had decided this knowledge was too dangerous, even for the Dark Angel's most trusted archivists. I sat back in my study chamber, staring at the ruined text, and wondered what truths lay hidden in those missing words. A knock at my door pulled me from dark contemplation. "Enter," I called, and was surprised to see Brother Nathaniel, a Deathwing veteran I had served alongside in the tertiary librarium divisions. His weathered face was drawn, shadows pooling beneath his eyes like bruises that would not heal. "Samael," he said, his voice rough as gravel, "I need to confess something before you depart for the Perdition Moon." Confession. The word sent ice through my veins. Among the Dark Angels, confession meant revelation of heresy, admission of contact with the fallen, or worse. I gestured for him to sit, closing and sealing the Tome of Atonement with a thought that activated its defensive wards. Nathaniel lowered himself into the chair across from my desk, like a man carrying the weight of worlds. His hands, which I had seen remain steady while firing bolters at charging tyrannid horrors, trembled as they gripped his knees. "I've been dreaming," he began, "for weeks now since before the transmission. Dreams of Caliban." "That's not unusual," I said carefully, watching his face for signs of corruption. "Many brothers dream of our lost homeworld. It's natural to..." "Not like this." He cut me off, and I heard desperation in his voice. "Samael, I've never seen Caliban. I was recruited from a hive world 2 systems away, inducted into the chapter barely a century ago. I've looked at pick captures and hololith recordings, but I've never walked those forests, never hunted the great beasts beneath those ancient trees." His hands clenched into fists. "But in my dreams I have. I know the smell of the ironwood trees when rain falls on their bark. I know the sound the great lions make when they're hunting, that low rumble that vibrates through your chest and makes your heart race. I know the taste of spring water from the streams that run through Alderuk's western approach. I know these things as if I lived them, Samael, and I am terrified because they cannot be memories, but they feel more real than any memory I actually possess." I felt my psychic senses extend automatically, probing Nathaniel's mind for signs of possession or corruption. What I found was worse than either. His memories were genuine, imprinted with all the emotional weight and sensory detail of lived experience. But they were impossible memories, scenes from a world that had died before he was born, knowledge that should have been inaccessible to his consciousness. "Has anyone else reported similar dreams?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Nathaniel nodded slowly. 17 brothers in the Deathwing alone, maybe more who haven't come forward yet, afraid of what confession might mean. We've all been experiencing the same thing, memories of Caliban, perfect in every detail, as if we're living the lives of brothers who died 10,000 years ago. Genetic memory, I thought. The Space Marine creation process incorporated genetic material from our Primarch, the lion, carrying traces of his experiences and knowledge into our very cells. But this was different. This was too specific, too vivid, too present to be a mere genetic echo. "I need you to tell Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai about this before we depart," I said finally. "If this is some form of psychic attack, he needs to know." "And Nathaniel." I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "Stay away from other brothers showing these symptoms. If this is contagious, we can't risk it spreading." He nodded and rose to leave, but paused at the door. "Samael, in my dreams, in those memories that aren't mine, I see him. Who? The lion. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Walking through the forests, hunting alone. And sometimes he stops and looks directly at me, as if he knows I'm watching from 10,000 years in the future. And he says, an alarm klaxon cut through whatever Nathaniel was about to reveal, its wailing urgent and immediate. My vox bead crackled to life, and I heard Grandmaster Samael's voice. All mission personnel to the hangar immediately. We have a situation. Nathaniel and I exchanged a glance of shared dread, then ran through the rock's corridors toward whatever fresh horror awaited us. We found the hangar in chaos, tech marines and serfs rushing to prepare Thunderhawk gunships, while Ravenwing bikers roared their engines in test sequences that filled the vast chamber with thunder. But it was the figure on the deck that drew every eye and froze every heart. A Deathwing veteran lay convulsing on the cold metal floor, surrounded by apothecaries who struggled to restrain him. Foam flecked his lips, and his eyes had rolled back until only whites showed. His voice emerged in broken gasps, words torn from a throat that sounded like it was tearing itself apart from the inside. The forests are alive again. The forests are alive again. He screamed the last words with such force that blood vessels burst in his eyes, turning them red as fresh kills. His body arched impossibly, spine bending until I heard vertebrae crack, despite the reinforcement of his catalepsian node implant. Then, as suddenly as the fit had begun, he went still. The apothecaries checked for vital signs, their movements practiced and efficient, despite the horror we had all witnessed. After a long moment, the lead medicae looked up at interrogator Chaplain Asmodai and shook his head slowly. Dead. A Dark Angel's veteran, enhanced beyond human limits, protected by the Emperor's finest genetic engineering and centuries of experience. Dead from a psychic attack so powerful, it had stopped his heart and boiled his brain inside his skull. I extended my senses cautiously, tasting the psychic residue that lingered in the hangar's recycled air. It was the same hollow emptiness I had felt from the transmission, but stronger now, more focused. Whatever force had killed this brother had been reaching for him specifically, pulling him towards something that existed in the space between memory and reality. Asmodai stepped over the corpse, his skull-faced helm tilted down in what might have been respect or calculation. His name was Brother Castiel, inducted into the Chapter 473 years ago, elevated to Deathwing 96 years past, after proving his loyalty in the hunt for fallen angel Ezreal on Thramas 4. He turned to address the gathered warriors. He died with honor, resisting a psychic assault that would have broken lesser men immediately. He died screaming about forests, one of the Ravenwing bikers muttered, and several brothers made the sign of the Aquila across their chests. Grandmaster Samael silenced them with a gesture. Which is why we go now, rather than wait for optimal conditions. Whatever is happening on the Perdition Moon, it's reaching out to us here, on the rock itself. We end this before it spreads further. He met my gaze across the hangar. Brother Librarian, I trust you're prepared to face whatever psychic horrors await us. I thought of the burned pages in the Tome of Atonement, of Nathaniel's impossible memories, of Brother Castiel's corpse cooling on the deck. I thought of Luther's voice speaking through 10,000 years of silence, and the forest that should have been dead dust floating in the void. As prepared as any man can be for something that should not exist, I replied. We boarded the Thunderhawks in grim silence, the roar of engines drowning out any further conversation. As my gunship lifted from the deck and turned toward the hangar's massive blast doors, I looked back one final time at the rock, that ancient fortress monastery that had been our home and our prison for 10 millennia. From this distance, backlit by the system's dying star, it looked exactly like what it was. A tombstone carved from the bones of our murdered homeworld, drifting through the void in eternal penance for sins we could never atone for. The blast doors sealed behind us, and we plunged into the darkness between worlds, toward a moon that should have been empty, but burned with green fire in the night. The journey to the Perdition Moon took 6 hours through the debris field that had once been Caliban. Each fragment of stone drifting past our viewports represented a piece of history scattered across the void. I spent the flight trying to center myself, but concentration proved impossible. A deep, primal fear was bleeding through even the most hardened veterans' mental shields. They were all remembering Caliban. Memories that should not exist were flooding into minds that had never lived them. Brother Librarian, Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai's voice cut through the vox bead. Join me in the command compartment. The inner circle has transmitted additional orders. I found him before a tactical hololith, his skull-faced helm removed. Asmodai was old, his face carved by centuries of righteous fury and bitter duty. Our mission parameters have expanded, he said, gesturing to the display. A new set of objectives glowed an ominous red. The list included the standard mission: locate the transmission source, eliminate any fallen, and recover artifacts. But the absolute priority chilled my blood. Absolute priority. Under no circumstances may knowledge of this mission reach anyone outside the inner circle. All witnesses not authorized for full disclosure are to be silenced. You understand what this means, Asmodai said, watching my reaction. If Luther truly walks again, we cannot allow word of it to spread. The fallen are our burden to bear. The Imperium can never know how completely we failed our Primarch. And if the source is not Luther, I asked, then we kill it anyway and burn every trace that it existed. The Dark Angels do not leave loose ends, brother. You know this. The Thunderhawk shuddered as we entered the Perdition Moon's thin atmosphere. Warning lights flashed. Grandmaster, we have a problem. Our pilot's voice emerged, strained. Sensors are reading atmospheric pressure at the surface. That's impossible. This moon has insufficient gravity, but the readings are clear. The hololith shifted to external camera feed. I felt my breath catch. Below us stretched an impossible landscape. Forests, vast forests of towering ironwood trees, leaves so dark they appeared black, spreading across the moon's surface like a cancer of impossible life. They swayed in the wind that should not exist, and between the trees, structures and ruins of a vast city. Caliban, I whispered. I recognized those trees. They should have all died when Luther shattered the planet. They could not possibly be growing here, in a vacuum. Caliban, Asmodai agreed, his voice hollow with shock. Or some mockery of it. Some warp-spawned reflection of what once was, grown from the ashes of our shame. Grandmaster Samael's voice cut through the growing chaos. All ships adjust for standard atmospheric entry. Whatever is down there, it knows we're coming. I extended my consciousness. What I found defied categorization. The forest pulsed with psychic energy, but it was cold and ancient, not hot and chaotic. It felt like memory given form, like the past bleeding through into present reality. No demon presence detected, I reported, but something is psychically active. The forests are aware. Explain, Asmodai demanded. It's planetary consciousness, I said finally. When Caliban died, his spirit didn't dissipate. It's been sleeping in these fragments, and now something has awakened it, called it back into form. Luther, the interrogator chaplain growled. He's calling Caliban itself back from death. Our Thunderhawk touched down. The ramp dropped with a hiss. I tasted air that was cool and rich with the scent of a living forest. I stepped out onto the surface of the Perdition Moon and felt Caliban's ghost press against my psyche, welcoming me home to a world I had never known but remembered with perfect clarity. Around me, my battle brothers moved in practiced formations, but I saw hesitation in their steps. Every instinct bred into us by genetic memory screamed that we should lower our weapons and kneel. "Perimeter secure," Samael reported. "Brother Librarian, approach my position." I found him gazing into the darkness. "Tell me I'm not going mad," he said quietly. "Tell me you see what I see." "I see it," I confirmed. "Caliban, or its memory made manifest." Before he could respond, a scout called out, "Grand Master, contact. I have a visual on structures, approximately 300 meters northeast. It looks like... Emperor preserve us. It looks like a cathedral." We moved toward the structure. Statues flanked the entrance, depicting the lion and Luther in poses of brotherhood. Water ran from their eyes like tears, but the liquid was not water. It was Calibanite ichor flowing from the stone. "I'm hearing something," a Marine reported, his voice tight, chanting in the old tongue. It was a pre-fall hymn, a song about the forests and their spirits. "We go in," Asmodai declared, Crozius Arcanum crackling. "Whatever awaits us, we face it together. We are the unforgiven." The doors swung open, revealing an interior lit by thousands of candles. Pews stretched toward an altar carved from ironwood. On that altar rested an object that made every dark angel present freeze in recognition and horror. A helmet, painted bone white. The helmet of Zahariel, one of Luther's most trusted lieutenants, whose fate was never known. And carved into the altar beneath that helmet, "Welcome." The cathedral doors slammed shut behind us. From the darkness, a voice began to speak, Luther's voice. "Do you remember the taste of home, my brothers? I have called you here to show you the truth you have spent 10 millennia running from." The statues outside began to weep louder, and I realized with dawning horror that we were not the hunters in this scenario. We were the prey. The cathedral's interior seemed to shift and breathe around us. Asmodai moved first, his centuries of faith overriding the paralysis that had seized us. His Crozius blazed as he strode toward the altar. "This is heresy," he pronounced, his voice echoing. "Sorcery and deception meant to shake our resolve. Reveal yourself and face judgment." The voice, Luther's voice replied, a whisper that spoke directly into our minds. "You call this heresy, Asmodai? You who has tortured thousands of your own brothers in the name of a secret shame. You dare speak of judgment when you have spent 6 centuries grinding souls beneath your heel." The interrogator chaplain faltered, a momentary flicker of doubt I'd never seen before. "I do what duty demands. I am the sword that cuts away the cancer of betrayal." "And I was the librarian who tried to save Caliban from the lion's abandonment," the voice countered, raw with centuries of anguish. "Tell me, Asmodai, who is the greater heretic? The one who raises his weapon in desperation, or the one who turns his back on those who need him most?" Grandmaster Samael cut through the pressure. "Enough, brother librarian. Analysis. Now." I forced my senses to expand. It's a psychic construct, built from the collective memories of everyone who died during the fall. The cathedral, the forests, the atmosphere, all of it is being maintained by a warp-based consciousness drawing on Caliban's planetary spirit. "Can you dispel it?" Samael asked. "I don't know. The power is unlike anything I've encountered. It would take the entire Librarius working in concert." A new sound reached us, heavy, armored footsteps. A figure emerged from the darkness beyond the altar. His armor was ancient, the deep green of the pre-heresy legion. His helmet was removed, revealing a gaunt face and eyes burning with fervor. "Brothers," the figure said, his voice rough, "welcome to the last true fragment of Caliban. Welcome home." Asmodai moved like a striking serpent, his Crozius Arcanum swinging, but the blow never landed. The stranger moved with impossible speed, reappearing 10 meters away. "I mean you no harm," the stranger said. "I am Brother Sergeant Ramiel, formerly of the 3rd Company. I have been here since the fall, waiting, watching, listening to the forests as they dreamed of resurrection." "The fallen," a biker spat. "I was not at Caliban when Luther raised his banner," Ramiel replied, his voice laced with profound grief. "I returned to the debris field and found this place, the Perdition Moon. Here, the forest still lived. Here, the planet's spirit refused to die." He gestured to the altar. "I found Zahariel's helmet. When I touched it, I heard his voice, and through his memories, I learned the truth the inner circle has hidden for 10,000 years." "Do not speak," Asmodai warned, his Crozius glowing with killing light. Ramiel continued, "Luther did not betray the lion betrayed us. He left Caliban defenseless while he pursued glory, abandoning us to warp storms and the turning of the forests. When we needed him most, he was not there." "Lies," Asmodai roared. His Crozius struck true, smashing into Ramiel's chest with devastating force. But Ramiel did not fall. He stood, absorbing the impact, then laughed, a sound of sorrow and resignation. "You cannot kill what is already dead, chaplain. I perished 2,000 years ago. What stands before you now is memory given form, the same as everything else in this place." A commotion erupted outside. Vox traffic exploded with panicked reports of unknown hostiles. "All units fall back to the cathedral," Samael ordered. The cathedral doors burst open. One of our Ravenwing scouts stumbled through, his armor shredded by claws. "They're hunting us," he gasped. "The lions, the great beasts, they're real." Behind him, roaring, deep, bass notes that triggered primal genetic fear, the sound our Primarch was named for. "Impossible," Asmodai breathed. "The great beasts died 10,000 years ago." Ramiel smiled sadly. "Everything dies, chaplain. But in Caliban's dreams, everything can live again. The forests remember what they were, and they are calling it all back." He touched Zahariel's helmet. "The question is whether you're prepared to face what comes next, when the forests finish remembering and Caliban truly walks again." The roaring grew closer, and through the stained glass, we glimpsed enormous felines with manes of shadow. And then, from somewhere in the forest beyond, a new sound cut through the chaos. Sound. The sharp, familiar crack of a bolt pistol, firing in 3 distinct bursts, followed by a single precision shot. A bolt pistol, firing in the precise pattern we had studied, analyzed, and committed to genetic memory since our indoctrination. It was the firing pattern of Lionel Johnson himself. "Do you hear it?" Ramiel whispered, ecstasy in his voice. "The lion walks. And he is not pleased with what his sons have become." The bolt pistol's report faded into the rustling of impossible leaves, leaving us in a silence more oppressive than any sound could be. Grandmaster Samael was the first to recover, his command training overriding the paralysis of shock and genetic recognition that had frozen the rest of us. "Defensive positions," he barked. "Brother Librarian, I want psychic confirmation of whatever we just heard. Interrogator Chaplain, secure the prisoner. Everyone else, prepare for contact with hostile forces, nature unknown." I reached out with my psychic senses, extending my consciousness through the cathedral's walls and into the forest beyond, seeking the source of that bolt pistol fire. What I found made me wish I had remained ignorant, because sometimes knowledge is a burden too heavy for any soul to carry. There was a presence in the woods, moving with the fluid grace of a born predator, following hunting patterns that had been ingrained into Dark Angel's combat doctrine for 10 millennia. It was physically potent beyond any space marine I had ever encountered. a blazing star of consciousness that should have been visible from orbit. But it was also incomplete somehow, fragmented like a reflection in a shattered mirror, pieces of personality scattered across too many surfaces to ever be reassembled into a coherent whole. "It's not him," I said, relief and disappointment warring in my chest. "It's not the lion. It's a construct like Ramiel, built from memories and psychic energy, shaped to resemble our Primarch. But it sounds exactly like the lion's firing pattern," one of the Raven-Wing bikers protested. "I've studied the training footage 1,000 times. That's his cadence, his rhythm, his preference for 3 round bursts followed by a single precision shot. Because whoever created it had access to the same memories you do," I explained, piecing together what I was sensing. "The forests don't just preserve the past, they reconstruct it from every fragment of memory available. Every dark angel who ever served carries genetic recollections of the lion. Those memories are raw material for whatever force is animating this place." Asmodai had Ramiel pressed against one of the cathedral's pillars, a null field generator active and draining the psychic energy that sustained the ancient warrior's impossible existence. Ramiel did not resist, merely watched with those burning eyes as the interrogator chaplain bound him in chains that glowed with holy inscriptions. "If what you say is true," Asmodai growled, "then this entire moon is an abomination that must be destroyed. We should call for exterminatus and sterilize this place before its corruption spreads." "You could try," Ramiel replied, his voice already beginning to fade as the null field drained him. "But Caliban has survived worse than orbital bombardment. The forests will endure. They always have. They always will." A tremendous impact shook the cathedral, followed by the screech of claws on stone as something massive struck the exterior walls. The stained glass windows shattered inward, showering us with shards of colored crystal that had depicted scenes from Caliban's history. The lion's discovery in the forests, Luther's rise to prominence, the great beast's final hunts before the coming of the Emperor. Through the broken windows, I caught my first clear glimpse of the creatures that were hunting us, and my enhanced memory helplessly supplied their name. Calibanite lions, the apex predators that had ruled our homeworld for millions of years before humanity's arrival. They were enormous, each one easily the size of a rhino transport, with shoulders that stood level with a space marine's head. Their manes were not hair, but something that resembled a living shadow, constantly shifting and flowing as if composed of pure darkness given physical form. Eyes glowed with that familiar green luminescence, intelligent and calculating in a way that spoke of more than animal cunning. But it was their faces that triggered the deepest horror, because beneath the leonine features, I could see human expressions, pain, rage, betrayal, and something that might have been pleading. These were not simple beasts, they were warriors transformed. Dark angels who had somehow been merged with the predators of their genetic memory, creating hybrid monstrosities that belonged to neither species. "Emperor, preserve us," someone whispered, and I heard the prayer taken up by other voices, a desperate litany against horror that defied comprehension. The lead beast, larger than the others, with a mane that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, padded closer to one of the shattered windows. When it opened its massive jaws, the voice that emerged was distorted but recognizable as High Gothic, spoken with a Calibanite accent that had not been heard in 10,000 years. "Brothers," it said, and the word came out mangled by a throat not designed for human speech. "Do not fear. We are, like you, sons of the lion, fallen to the forest's embrace. Come, join us. Remember what we were." One of the younger space marines raised his bolter, finger tightening on the trigger, but Grandmaster Samael knocked the weapon aside before he could fire. "Hold," the commander ordered. "These were once our brothers. They deserve better than to be gunned down like animals." "They are no longer our brothers," Asmodai countered, his voice harsh with certainty. "They are corrupted, transformed by warp sorcery into mockeries of what they once were. The merciful thing is to grant them the Emperor's peace." The creature that had spoken made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been weeping. It was impossible to tell through its distorted vocalizations. Corrupted, it repeated. No, reborn, the forests. Remember what the lion truly was, before the emperor found him, before he became a tool of unity, when he was wild and free and belonged to Caliban alone. It turned its massive head, fixing me with eyes that held far too much awareness. You understand, librarian. You feel it, the pull of the forests, the memory of what we could be, without the Imperium, without the shame, just the hunt, just the brotherhood, just home. An emperor helped me, I did understand, because the psychic pressure emanating from these creatures was not corrupting in the traditional sense. It was not the hot, chaotic madness of the warp, or the cold, calculated evil of demons. It was something older and more primal, the call of a world that had loved its children and wanted them back no matter what form that return might take. This is temptation, Asmodai declared, though I heard uncertainty beneath his righteous fury. A test of faith designed to break our resolve and turn us from the Emperor's light. Or it's the truth the inner circle has spent 10,000 years running from, Ramiel said weakly, his form beginning to fade as the null field continued its work. That Caliban never wanted to be part of the Imperium, that the forests chose Luther because he was willing to defend our home against integration into a regime that cared nothing for our traditions, our culture, our way of life. Heresy, Asmodai breathed, but the word lacked conviction. Another impact shook the cathedral, and this time I felt stone beginning to crack under the assault. The transformed dark angels were testing our defenses, circling the structure like the predators they had become. Through my psychic senses, I could feel more presences emerging from the forest. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, all bearing the psychic signature of dark angels who had died during the fall. We were surrounded by our own dead, by brothers who had been claimed by Caliban's dreaming spirit and reshaped into something that was neither human nor beast, neither alive nor truly dead. And they were calling to us, inviting us to join them in a hunt that would never end, in forests that would never die. We need to move, Grandmaster Samael decided, his tactical mind cutting through the philosophical and theological implications. This structure cannot hold against a sustained assault. Brother Librarian, can you open a path through the forest? Get us back to the Thunderhawks. I extended my senses toward our landing site and felt my heart sink. The ships are gone, not destroyed, moved. The forests have relocated them somehow, scattered them across the moon's surface. I can sense 3 distinct locations, but they're kilometers apart. Then we walk, Samael said grimly. We make for the nearest transport and fight our way through whatever stands between us and extraction. Ravenwing, Vanguard formation, Deathwing, rear guard. Librarians maintain psychic shields against whatever corruption is attempting to influence our thoughts. Move out. But before we could organize our retreat, the cathedral's altar began to glow with intensifying green light. Zahariel's helmet rose into the air, suspended by invisible forces, and I felt psychic pressure building to levels that made my head throb with sympathetic pain. Ramiel, despite being drained by the null field, began to laugh, a sound edged with madness and triumph. Too late, he gasped. The forests have finished remembering. The name has been spoken. The binding is complete. The altar cracked down the middle with a sound like thunder, and from the rift that appeared, something began to emerge. At first I thought it was smoke or shadow, but as it took form I realized it was neither. It was memory made manifest, consciousness pulled from the collective psychic weight of 10,000 years of grief and shame and desperate longing. It was a space marine, but taller than any I had seen outside of records of the Primarchs themselves. His armor was ancient beyond measure, painted in colors that shifted and changed. Now the green of pre-heresy dark angels, now the black of the unforgiven, now something that seemed to predate both, a deep forest green that matched the leaves of the ironwood trees. and carved into every surface of that armor, written in scripts, both High Gothic and the ancient tongue of Caliban, was a single name repeated thousands of times: Zahariel. The figure's head turned, and though it wore a helmet, I felt its gaze sweep across us with the weight of divine judgment. When it spoke, the voice was not Luther's this time, but younger, touched with idealism and hope that had long since curdled into bitterness and despair. "I am the memory of what we could have been," Zahariel's shade proclaimed. "I am the ghost of brotherhood betrayed, of loyalty rewarded with abandonment, of faith punished with destruction. I am Caliban's final judgment upon the sons who abandoned her." The shade raised an arm, pointing directly at Grandmaster Samael. "You hunt the fallen across the galaxy, seeking redemption for sins you did not commit. But the true sin was not Luther's rebellion. The true sin was the lion's absence when his people needed him most." "Lies," Asmodai shouted, but I could hear doubt creeping into his voice now, uncertainty that would have been unthinkable hours ago. "The lion served the Emperor as all loyal sons should. Luther betrayed his oath and condemned our world to death." "The lion served his own ambition," the shade countered. "He left us to guard a world already saved, denied us the glory of the Great Crusade while he claimed it for himself. And when we finally raised our voices in protest, when we dared to ask why we were abandoned, he branded us traitors and tried to kill us all." The shade's form solidified further, becoming more real with each passing moment. I realized with growing horror that it was drawing power from our presence, feeding on the psychic turmoil and doubt that its words were creating in our minds. Every moment of uncertainty, every flicker of what if, was fuel for the manifestation. "Do not listen," I called out, broadcasting the warning through our Vox network and psychically to every brother present. "It's using our own doubts against us, growing stronger from our uncertainty. We must maintain faith in the lion, in the Emperor, in our purpose." But even as I spoke the words, I felt my own conviction wavering. Because I had seen the archives, I had read the classified reports from the fall of Caliban, and I knew that the truth was more complicated than the simple narrative of loyal sons and traitor brothers that the inner circle taught. I knew that Luther had raised legitimate grievances, that the lion had been distant and cold, that Caliban had been treated as a backwater rather than the homeworld that had shaped the First Legion. The cathedral walls began to crack further as psychic pressure built to unbearable levels. Through the widening fissures, I could see the forests pressing closer, branches reaching through stone like grasping fingers. The transformed dark angels outside had stopped their assault, instead arranging themselves in a circle around the building, watching with those two intelligent eyes as if waiting for something. "Choose!" Zahariel's shade commanded, and its voice resonated through my bones. "Remain loyal to a chapter built on lies and shame, forever hunting shadows of a betrayal you do not truly understand. Or accept the truth, that Caliban loved you, that the forests remember you, that home is calling you back to what you were always meant to be." Grandmaster Samael raised his bolt pistol, aiming directly at the shade's head. His hand was steady, his voice firm with certainty that I envied. "We are dark angels. We are the unforgiven. We will never stop hunting the fallen, never cease our quest for redemption, never betray the oaths we swore to the Emperor and the Lion. Whatever you are, whatever truth you claim to offer, we reject it." He fired, and the mass-reactive round struck the shade's center mass, detonating with force that should have obliterated any normal target. But Zahariel's form merely rippled, absorbing the impact, and when the smoke cleared, it stood unchanged. "Then you will learn," the shade said, and I heard sadness in its voice now. "The forests will teach you what the inner circle has hidden. You will remember what you have forgotten. You will know the truth, even if it destroys you." The shade raised both arms, and the cathedral exploded outward in a blast of psychic force that sent us tumbling through the air. I hit the ground hard enough to crack ceramite, rolling through undergrowth that should not have been soft, but somehow cushioned my fall. Around me, my battle brothers were similarly scattered, thrown dozens of meters in different directions by the psychic shockwave. When I managed to rise to my feet, the cathedral was gone, not destroyed, but simply absent, as if it had never existed at all. In its place stood a grove of ironwood trees arranged in a perfect circle, and at the center of that circle, carved from living wood that wept Calibanite ichor, was a name I recognized from the darkest archives of our chapter. Zahariel El-Zurius, keeper of the truth, and beneath that name, carved in letters that seemed to burn, themselves into my retinas, do not seek me. We regrouped at the edge of the grove. Smoke drifted through the trees, and the air still hummed with psychic residue. We had survived the blast barely, armor cracked, senses dulled, faith shaken. Ramiel was gone. The chains that had bound him lay empty in the dirt where the cathedral once stood. Whether he had been destroyed or released back into the forest's mind, none of us could say. Either way, our only source of truth had vanished. "Status report," Grandmaster Samael commanded. His voice was iron, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. One by one, the brothers answered, voices steady but lined with something new: doubt. Then Asmodai spoke. "Interrogator chaplain reporting. Functional. But I must confess something that may damn me." Every helm turned. The forest fell silent. For an interrogator chaplain to speak of confession was unthinkable. "I have conducted 17,432 interrogations of the fallen," Asmodai said, "and not one has ever denied the same truth, that Luther was not entirely wrong. The lion abandoned us, that Caliban deserved better." The words hung in the air like a curse, heresy, or revelation. "This is the forest's work," I said quickly. "It twists our minds, sows doubt." But even as I spoke, I felt the lie burn my tongue. I'd seen what Asmodai had seen, read the sealed archives, heard the confessions of dying brothers who still believed themselves righteous. A scream cut through the vox. We turned and froze. Brother Castiel was rising, but Castiel was dead. He had died aboard the rock. Now his armor wept green ichor, and his voice came distorted, as if dragged through water. "The forests," he gasped. "They're singing. So many voices, calling us home." Then his eyes turned white and glowed. When he spoke again, it was not one voice but a chorus. "We never wished to betray the lion. We only wanted him to see what his absence cost. Luther tried to make him listen, but the lion came in wrath, not understanding. Cyclonic torpedoes do not hear prayers." Caliban died screaming. Asmodai raised his Crozius, but I stopped him. "Let it speak." The possessed marine trembled, his words a dying wind. "We wanted to be seen," the voices whispered, "not destroyed." Then Castiel collapsed, whispering in his own fading voice, "Am I alive? Or something in between?" No one answered. "Establish a perimeter," Samael ordered, clinging to protocol. "High ground, sight lines, tactical orders, spoken like prayers against madness." But Asmodai didn't move. His gaze was distant, haunted. "No," he said, "no more running. I will interrogate this place. I will make Caliban itself speak." "You can't interrogate a psychic manifestation," one of the Raven Wings said. "Can't I?" Asmodai replied. "It remembers. If it remembers, it can confess." He walked to the weeping ironwood carved with Zahariel's name and knelt. He removed his skull helm, revealing a face carved by centuries of righteous fury. Then he began to pray. Not in High Gothic, not in the Emperor's tongue, but in the old words of Caliban, words the lion himself had long forbidden. "I call upon the memory of what was lost. I demand the truth you keep. Show me." The forest answered. Branches bent toward him. The ground bled green light. The air grew heavy until my thoughts were pulsed with pain. Asmodai's body went rigid, and then he screamed, not in agony, but in revelation. Through the psychic backlash, I saw what he saw. Luther in Alderuk's great hall, pleading with the lion not to leave. The lion's cold silence. Years of abandonment. Caliban was forgotten while its sons guarded an empty world. Warp storms rising, twisting forest and flesh alike. Luther, desperate to hold the world together as it tore apart. And then the Lion's return, not to forgive, not to listen, but to judge. Orbital bombardment, fire from the heavens, Caliban broken, its spirit is shattered but not gone, echoing across 10,000 years, remembering. When it ended, Asmodai collapsed, tears glowing green upon his scarred cheeks. "I saw it," he whispered. "The lion failed us. We have hunted the fallen not for justice, but to bury our shame." Samael's hand went to his weapon. "Chaplain, you've been compromised." "No," Asmodai said. "I saw the lion weep." He knew. He knew his pride destroyed Caliban. And we, his sons, have borne that guilt ever since. He rose, trembling with conviction. "The forests aren't our enemy. They are Caliban's soul. It calls to us, demanding that we remember." "That's corruption," a Deathwing veteran barked. "We should end this." But none moved, because we all felt it too. Deep inside our gene seed, something ancient stirred, a memory older than the Imperium. Then came the sound of salvation, the roar of engines, a thunderhawk descending through the canopy. Hope, escape, but the forest moved. Branches as thick as towers lashed upward, striking the gunship from the air. It shattered in flames, screaming through the trees. I felt the psychic echo of our brothers dying before their bodies even hit the ground. "We're trapped," someone whispered. Asmodai laughed, the sound cracked and broken. "We've always been trapped. The forests don't imprison us. They offer freedom. Truth." "That's heresy," Samael said. "Is it?" Asmodai's voice trembled with terrible clarity. "We hunt the fallen to avoid confessing our own sins. I have broken thousands for truth. Now it's my turn to confess." He stepped toward the grove, voice like thunder. "The burden of the interrogator is not to judge, but to bear the sins of the fallen. I have carried them all, too long." "Asmodai, stop!" I shouted. But he opened his mind, fully tearing down his psychic defenses. The forest poured into him like a storm. His armor cracked, his body convulsed, and then began to change. Black ceramite turned green, the color of the old legion. Branches grew from his back like wings of living wood. His face twisted and shifted, young, old, all ages at once. "I see it all," he gasped. His voice had become a chorus. Every confession, every lie, every sin. When he looked at us, his eyes glowed with the forest's light. "The interrogator's burden is to absorb guilt so others may remain pure. But the weight has become too great. Caliban offers to share it. Is that not mercy?" "That's not mercy," I said. "That's oblivion." He smiled, sorrowful and radiant. "Perhaps oblivion is mercy." We are all ghosts of Caliban, playing out a tragedy written long before our birth. His body blurred, merging with the trees. The ground split open before him, revealing a staircase descending into blackness, a wound in the world itself. "Come," Asmodai's fading voice whispered. "Come and see what lies at the heart of Caliban's memory. Come and meet the one who calls you home." And despite every instinct screaming to run, I stepped forward, because sometimes the only way out is through, and sometimes the only way to escape a lie is to face the truth. Asmodai's fading form led us through tunnels carved from stone that remembered being alive. The walls pulsed with veins of Calibanite ichor, their faint green glow casting everything in that familiar sickly light. I could barely recall what natural daylight looked like. Grandmaster Samael led the column with grim purpose, the look of a man who knew he was walking toward damnation, but would never let his warriors see fear. Behind him, the remaining dark angels advanced in silence, bolters raised, though all of us knew in the depths of our gene-forged bones that no weapon of man would matter against what waited below. I walked near the center, maintaining psychic shields that thinned with every step. The pressure here was immense, ancient memories pressing against my mind like the depths of an ocean, crushing a diver who had gone too deep. I could feel my sense of self beginning to blur. Thoughts not my own bled into my mind. I am Brother Librarian Samael, I reminded myself. I serve the dark angels. I hunt the fallen. I am unforgiven, but not forsaken. A whisper rose from within my skull. Are you, or are you Samael of Caliban, the hunter beneath ironwood trees, 10,000 years before your birth? Are you one man, or every soul this world has ever mourned? Brother Librarian, Grandmaster Samael's voice cut through the fog. Status report. Are you still with us? Present and functional, Grandmaster, I managed, but the psychic pressure increases exponentially. If we go deeper, I cannot guarantee protection against intrusion. He nodded once. Noted, but we press on. Whatever calls to us lies below. I will face it directly, not from the shadows. The passage widened into an impossible vastness. Above us stretched a forest canopy made of living branches, growing downward from stone. Roots glowed faintly, swaying in an unseen breeze, and among them hung bodies. Hundreds, no, thousands of space marines, suspended in the air by cords of root and memory. Each wore the ancient armor of the pre-heresy Dark Angels. Each is perfectly preserved. They hung as if merely sleeping. The fallen, someone whispered, awe and horror intertwined. But not all of them were. As my psychic vision adjusted, I understood the truth. These were not only traitors, they were doubters. Warriors who had hesitated when the lion ordered them to turn their guns upon their homeworld. A monument not of rebellion, but of conflicted loyalty. They're dreaming, I said, the revelation hitting like a thunderbolt, all of them, suspended between life and death, living the lives they might have had if Caliban had survived. Asmodee's voice from somewhere unseen. To trap souls in false paradise, to deny them the Emperor's judgment. That is heresy beyond words. And then a voice, calm, sorrowful, filled the chamber. Is it? I knew that voice. Every son of Caliban knew it. Luther. A figure walked forth from the void, a space marine, ancient beyond measure, his armor worn to ruin, his eyes burning with the weight of 10,000 years. Luther, Samael breathed, raising his bolt pistol. You should be dead. I am, Luther said softly. This is memory given shape. The echo of a man who loved too deeply and destroyed what he sought to save. He gestured to the suspended legion above us. We are all echoes here, replaying our tragedy endlessly, hoping one day it ends differently. Samael fired. The bolt struck true and passed through Luther like smoke. The figure rippled but did not fall. You cannot kill what is already dead, Grandmaster, he said, nor silence truth with bullets. Luther's eyes locked on Samael's. The fall of Caliban was not the story you were taught. It was not good and evil. It was love, twisted by duty, loyalty crushed by pride. You raised arms against your Primarch, Asmodee's voice snarled from the shadows. You betrayed him. That is a fact. Is it betrayal? Luther asked. To defend one's home when your Primarch leaves it to die. We called for help, but he did not answer. When the warp storms rose, we begged the lion to return. He chose conquest over kin. He stepped closer, voice rising with conviction. What if I told you his orbital bombardment was not desperation, but convenience? That annihilation of Caliban was his final silence, so none would live to question his failure. His words struck like thunder. None of us spoke. Every fallen I had ever interrogated had said the same. We fought to protect, not betray. And we, the unforgiven, had called them liars. The chamber shuddered. Blood dripped from my nose as psychic pressure built to agony. The suspended warriors began to glow, faces sharpening into those I knew. Fallen, I had judged. Brothers, I had condemned. They're all here, I whispered. Every fallen we ever killed. Not killed, Luther said gently. Preserved. Caliban remembers her children, even those who failed her. Especially those who failed her. For failure, born of love, is more sacred than success born of apathy. He faced Samael fully now, his voice solemn, weary. You came seeking truth. Here it is. Will you return and preach the same lies, or will you face what the forests whisper? That redemption cannot be found through denial, only through understanding. Samael's jaw tightened. We are dark angels. We are the unforgiven. We hunt the fallen until the last is judged. Without that, we are nothing. Luther smiled, sad and knowing. Yes, you are nothing without guilt. You have built an entire brotherhood upon shame. Tell me, is that truly what the lion would have wanted for his sons? Eternal self-punishment. The walls groaned, the forest trembled. Something vast stirred beyond our sight. There's another presence, I gasped. Something greater, something ancient. Luther nodded. The lion, or what remains of him, the memory of your Primarch, bound to every son who bears his gene seed. You asked if he walks these woods, Grandmaster. He does, not as he was, but as we remember him. Then the far wall dissolved, and the air filled with light. Before us sat a throne of living ironwood, woven from roots and sorrow. Upon it, a figure of impossible stature, armor the green of Caliban's forests, hair like a lion's mane, a face both terrible and beautiful, the lion, or something built from our collective memory of him. His eyes swept over us, suns divided by 10,000 years of guilt. My sons, the figure said, voice like thunder rolling through mountains. Welcome home. We have much to discuss. Father, Grandmaster Samael said, his voice cracking. 10,000 years of genetic loyalty overwhelmed all tactical sense, and the dark angels knelt before the manifestation. I remained standing, my psychic shields barely holding. Rise, the construct commanded. I am not the father you remember. I am what Caliban believes he should have been. Present, attentive, caring for the sons he left behind. Luther moved to the throne. They have seen the preservation, witnessed the truth of the fall. Now comes the test. Will they accept what they have learned, or retreat into comfortable lies? The construct rose, 4 meters tall, radiating immense power. You will be tested first, Grandmaster Samael. It reached out and touched Samael's forehead. Through our connection, I saw his vision, Caliban, before the fall, cities gleaming under sunlight, and a different history. The lion choosing to remain on Caliban, telling the Emperor his homeworld needed him more than the crusade. Samael saw a chapter that never became unforgiven, a life free of shame. Then the vision shifted, revealing the cost. Without the First Legion, the crusade faltered. Worlds that should have been saved were lost. Millions died because the lion chose his homeworld over the Imperium's greater need. The vision ended. Samael collapsed, gasping. That's the choice, isn't it? Samael choked out, tears streaming down his face. He chose the Imperium over his homeworld because that was the right choice for the greater good. Was it? The construct asked, gentle now. Or did he choose glory over duty? Was the entire structure flawed, demanding you betray one to serve the other? I don't know, Samael admitted, and the confession seemed to cost him everything. I don't know if there was a right choice. All I know is that Caliban fell, and maybe that penance has become its own damnation. The construct nodded. The fall of Caliban was not a story with heroes and villains. It was a tragedy in the classical sense. Good people making reasonable choices that led to catastrophic outcomes. Sound. A faint, distant sound of tearing metal and the crackle of energy weapons. You will all face this test, the construct announced, and then you will choose. Do you continue to hunt the fallen in the name of a simple narrative, or do you accept the complexity of truth and find a new path forward? The hunt is what defines us. Asmodee's voice emerged from the shadows. Without it, the Dark Angels cease to exist as a coherent chapter. Perhaps that would be mercy, Luther suggested. No. A younger Marine spoke up, his voice ringing with conviction. The hunt gives us purpose beyond simple warfare. It's humility masquerading as righteousness. We hunt them because we ourselves might have fallen just as easily. Then there is hope for you, the construct said approvingly. It gestured to the suspended bodies. These brothers sleep because they were torn apart by impossible choices. Wake them, decide their fate with full understanding of what they truly are. Not traitors, but brothers who made different choices. A tremor ran through the chamber. Luther's form flickered. "The fallen," Luther said, urgency in his voice. "The true fallen have found this place. They are coming." "Impossible," Asmodai protested. The Perdition Moon was classified. "Someone told them," I finished, the realization chilling me. "Someone in the inner circle wants this confrontation." The lion construct's form began to destabilize. They bring weapons that can harm even memory, psychic null fields that can erase consciousness itself. If they succeed, Caliban's last fragment will be destroyed. "Then we defend this place," Samael declared, certainty returning to his voice. "Dark Angels, defensive formation. Prepare to repel hostile forces." Sound. Chaos. The sound of stone being pulverized. The high whine of psychic null fields. Bolter fire. The chamber walls cracked. Through the gaps we saw power-armored figures bearing the heraldry of the fallen, advancing with practiced coordination. "Cypher!" Asmodai breathed, as a cloaked figure emerged behind the attacking force, carrying the lion's own bolt pistol and a glowing sword. "Brothers of the First," Cypher's voice carried across the chamber, "I have not come to fight you, but to prevent a great crime. I offer you one chance to stand aside and let me cleanse this place of corruption." "This is preservation, not corruption," Luther countered, solidifying his form. "I would grant them the dignity of true death," Cypher replied. The lion construct rose one final time, its power fading. "I have shown these brothers the truth. You would destroy that understanding with violence and absolutism." "I would destroy a lie before it consumes another generation," Cypher shot back. "The Dark Angels do not need false reconciliation. We need to move forward." "We don't have time for this debate," I shouted. "The forest is collapsing. In seconds, every preserved soul will be released into the warp. Is that what you want, Cypher?" The hooded figure lowered his weapons. "A temporary alliance, then. We stabilize this place long enough to evacuate the preserved souls properly. Then we settle our philosophical differences." "Agreed," Samael said with reluctance. I knelt beside the fading construct. "I need to access the full power of Caliban's consciousness. I need help." "Then you will have help," Luther said, his form solidifying fully. "I am the anchor point. Take what power you need, librarian. Save my brothers even if you cannot save me." I linked my consciousness to Luther's, and the rush of 10,000 years of accumulated love and guilt poured into my mind. I felt his final regret, his sorrow, his desperate wish to take back the moment of rebellion. "I see you," I whispered to Luther's shade. "Not traitor, not hero, but a brother who loved too much and chose poorly." "Tell the lion if you ever find him that I never stopped believing in him," Luther replied, his consciousness dissolving completely, his energy flowing into me. "Tell him I wish we'd had more time to simply be brothers." I reached out to the preserved souls, sharing Luther's memory, his love, his doubt. "Choose," I commanded, my voice echoing with the power of a dead world's ghost. "Choose whether to wake to a universe that will judge you harshly, or remain in dreams where you can be heroes again." And one by one they began to wake. "So the nightmare continues," one veteran sergeant said, laughing with relief and resignation. I maintained the psychic connection as Samael's forces and Cypher's fallen established an uneasy evacuation. But then I felt the true consciousness of Caliban stirring, the planetary spirit itself, angry at its death, rising like a titan. "Everyone out," I shouted. "The forest is waking fully. It will reshape this entire moon." The lion construct, in its final breath, spoke one last message directly into my mind. "Find him. Find the true lion. He sleeps beneath the rock, dreaming of Caliban and weeping for what he lost." Wake him, show him the truth. Only then can the dark angels truly become unforgiven no longer. Then it was gone. We burst from the forest to our waiting thunderhawks, watching as the Perdition Moon transformed. The forest spread, consuming the surface, glowing green with psychic energy. Carved into the surface, in letters large enough to be seen from orbit, was a single message. Caliban remembers. The journey back to the rock was conducted in absolute silence. We were surrounded by brothers whose faith had been shaken to its foundation, and I felt the weight of what we had learned pressing down like the lid of a coffin. Grandmaster Samael was sequestered in the command cabin, drafting his report to the inner circle. I knew official reports rarely captured the full, dangerous truth of a psychic encounter. Some truths were simply too dangerous to commit to any data slate. Beside me, Asmodai sat motionless, his skull-faced helm finally removed. The righteous fury that had defined him for 6 centuries was gone, replaced by something that looked like shell shock. He had merged with the forest's consciousness, felt the pain he'd inflicted in the name of truth. That experience had hollowed him out. "I need to confess," he said suddenly, his voice barely a whisper, tears tracking down his scarred cheeks. "To whom?" I asked gently. "You're the interrogator chaplain. You're the one who hears confessions." "Then I confess to you, to these brothers, to anyone who will listen." He looked around the compartment. "I have tortured innocents. The doctrine was wrong. The fall was more complicated than the simple narrative we've been taught. The inner circle will never accept that," Asmodai said with bitter certainty. "They've built 10,000 years of tradition around maintaining the simple narrative. To admit complexity now would require them to acknowledge their own culpability. Better to suppress what we learned and continue as we always have." The Thunderhawk shuddered as we docked. I felt the oppressive psychic weight of the fortress monastery settle over us like a shroud. This was home, yet after witnessing the loving consciousness of Caliban's ghost, the rock seemed cold, dead and hostile, a tomb pretending to be a sanctuary. We disembarked to find Supreme Grandmaster Azrael waiting with a full honor guard of Deathwing Terminators. His face was carved from stone, revealing nothing, but I could read his psychic signature. He already knew. Somehow, Azrael knew everything that had happened on the Perdition Moon, and he had made his decision. "You are hereby summoned to attend the inner circle for immediate debriefing." Azrael's voice was formal, pitched to carry across the hangar bay. "All data slates, recording devices, and psychic impressions are to be surrendered." It was a trap. I felt the psychic null fields activating, cutting off all communication. Whatever happened in that debriefing would be controlled, contained, and quite possibly lethal. "Understood, Supreme Grandmaster," Samael replied, steady despite the danger. "We serve as the chapter requires." We followed Azrael through corridors that now seemed threatening. The inner circle's sanctum, the same green-lit chamber, the same 23 figures arrayed in judgment. This time, I was there as a potential heretic. "Report," Azrael commanded. Grandmaster Samael stepped forward and delivered a masterful piece of fiction, a report containing just enough tactical truth to be believable while omitting all philosophical implications. He described Luther's shade as a construct meant to deceive the lion entity as a warp-spawned illusion. The assembled masters nodded in approval, but then Asmodai stepped forward. "I must contradict the Grand Master's report," the interrogator chaplain said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of certainty. What we encountered was not simple trickery. It was truth, painful, complicated, damning truth about the fall of Caliban. "Interrogator chaplain," Azrael's voice cracked with warning, "you will cease this testimony immediately." "I will not." Asmodai's defiance was absolute. He pulled off his remaining armor, standing before the inner circle in his black body glove, a suicidal gesture of vulnerability. "I have broken souls for 600 years, and every fallen I interrogated told the same story. that Luther was not entirely wrong, that the lion failed Caliban. I dismissed it as lies. But on the Perdition Moon, I experienced Luther's memories directly. I felt his love for the lion, his desperation as Caliban fell. And brothers, it was real. "This is corruption," an Inner Circle member declared, rising. "Then confine me, purge me, but first answer me this. Why did every fallen I ever interrogated tell the same story before I encountered any psychic construct? Why is there such consistency unless there is truth at its core?" Silence. Azrael finally spoke, his voice cold as the void. "The consistency you note is explained by coordinated deception among the fallen." Or, I interjected, unable to remain silent, the consistency exists because it is true. Because the fall was a tragedy born of impossible choices and failures on both sides. I will not lie, what we experienced was real. "Then you leave me no choice," Azrael's fury flared. "Brother Librarian Samael, Interrogator Chaplain Asmodai, you are hereby stripped of rank and confined to quarters." "And the other brothers who were with us?" Samael asked, identifying the flaw in Azrael's plan. "Will you confine them all? Examine them all? What happens when they confirm our story?" "They will be handled appropriately," Azrael replied, but uncertainty crept into his voice. This was not a few corrupted brothers, this was dozens of veterans. "You cannot suppress this," I pressed. "Too many know. Too many have seen. You can confine us, execute us even, but you cannot stop the truth from spreading." "Watch me," Azrael growled. Psychic commands raced out, null fields intensified, blast doors sealed, armed terminators began moving. The rock was becoming a prison. "They're purging the chapter," I whispered to Samael as we were marched away. "Everyone who might question the Inner Circle's authority." "Then we find a way to break that control," Samael replied, his voice low. "We owe it to Luther's memory." A Deathwing Terminator struck me with his power fist, driving me to my knees. "No talking," he growled, as they dragged me toward the isolation cells, deep in the rock's core. I pushed my psychic senses one final time, and I felt a presence I had not noticed before, buried so deep that even the Inner Circle might not know it existed, a consciousness that felt familiar, impossibly vast. The lion, not dead, not truly sleeping, but trapped in stasis, his consciousness was reduced to a flicker. The lion construct's final command echoed in my mind. Find him, wake him, show him the truth. Azrael had made a mistake by confining me in the depths of the rock, because down here, in the darkness, I was closer to our Primarch than any Dark Angel had been in 10 millennia. Close enough to touch his dreams. Close enough, perhaps, to wake him. The cell was a stone tomb, 3 meters by 3, carved from the heart of the rock itself. No windows, no sound. Only a flickering lumen strip that pulsed irregularly, bathing the walls in sickly light. To an unaugmented man, the constant strobing would drive the mind to madness within hours. But I was not a man. I was a librarian of the Dark Angels, trained in the stillness between thought and memory, master of the mind's quiet places. This was meant to be my torture. Instead, it became my opportunity. I sat upon the iron cot, cross-legged, hands resting on my knees. Breath slowed, heart steady, thought peeled away from flesh, descending into the deeper currents of the soul. The null fields here were strong, meant to block communication with the warp. But they were outward-facing. Their purpose was containment, not introspection. They could not stop me from looking inward. And what I sought was not beyond this cell. It was beneath it, beneath the rock itself, down through layers of stone that reminded Caliban of its forests, its monsters, its fall. The psychic residue of 10,000 years lay buried there, like ghosts pressed into the bedrock. Wars fought, secrets buried, lies told, again and again, to keep a broken brotherhood whole. And at the deepest foundation, I found it. A chamber that should not exist, carved from primeval stone that even the warp had never touched. And within that chamber, suspended in a stasis field that had endured millennia beyond its design, hung the lion. Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the First Legion, father of the unforgiven. He floated there motionless, serene, untouched by time. His armor is dim but uncorroded, his face calm in a way I had never imagined. The lion was not at peace in life. He was storm, relentless, decisive, always in motion. But in sleep, he looked almost human. I approached, my astral form a shadow of thought and will. Here, in this sacred depth, sight became truth, and what I saw broke something in me. The lion was dreaming. His dreams bled psychic energy into the stone, saturating the rock like water through soil. Every vision, every memory, every echo of guilt, they all came from him. The forests that haunted the fallen, the visions that plagued the unforgiven, even Luther's ghost with his perfect recollection of the fall. All of it was the lion's dream, projected through the warp, through his gene sons, through time itself. He dreamed of Caliban, hunting in the deep woods, the great beasts stalking between ancient trees, the thrill of the chase. The young knight returned with his prize. And then the day he met Luther, the brother he had never known he needed, rival, confidant, friend, and then came the Emperor, the great crusade, the terrible choice, remain a man of Caliban or become a god of war. He left, and Caliban began to die. Reports from home turned dark, storms rising, the forests whispering again. Luther's letters grew desperate, pleading for help, for understanding. But the lion pressed onward. There was always another campaign, always another victory, until the day he returned to find his world turned against him. Luther waiting, weapons raised, love turned to betrayal, or perhaps betrayal born of love. The lion's pride could not bear it. He rained fire upon the world that had made him, and Caliban shattered. That moment, that single act of rage and loss, echoed forever, through stone, through blood, through every dark angel who has ever whispered the word unforgiven. I drew back, trembling. This was no legend, sanitized doctrine. This was the truth. The lion had not been the flawless hero of our catechisms. He was brilliant, yes, but flawed, haunted, human. I spoke not aloud, but in thought. You know you failed them. You know Luther was not entirely wrong. Why do you hide here, sleeping, when you could return and make amends? The lion stirred. His body remained still, yet his presence filled the air like burning sunlight. Because waking means accepting what I did, came his voice, heavy as stone. If I wake, I must face Caliban's death, my son's shame, my own pride. I must bear the weight of 10,000 years of failure. Better to dream of what was than face what is. That's cowardice, I said. The words echoed like thunder in the psychic plane. You call yourself the Emperor's finest, yet you hide from the truth. You abandon those who loved you. Luther, Caliban, us. The lion's psychic form rose before me, radiant, vast, and terrible. Do not lecture me on duty, child. I have fought wars beyond your imagining. I have sacrificed more than you can comprehend. Then why does your sacrifice feel like abandonment? I shouted. Your sons needed their father and you gave them a ghost. You destroyed the very things you were meant to protect. Silence. And then he looked at me. You speak as Luther spoke, he said quietly. The same accusations, the same pain beneath the anger, the same need for me to admit. Then maybe you should have listened to him, I whispered. The lion's form dimmed, not in power but in sorrow. I was made to conquer, he said. Not to heal, not to nurture. The Emperor built me for war. Compassion was meant to come from you, my sons. He turned away. I failed Luther. I failed you all. These dreams, they are my punishment. Every night I see Caliban burn again. Every morning I try to forget, but the dream never ends. Then wake, I told him. End the dream. The dark angels are tearing themselves apart, still lying, still hiding, killing their own to protect the myth of your perfection. You could stop it. you could bring truth. He hesitated. And if the truth destroys them, then let it. Better truth than the poison of denial. A new voice joined us. Asmodai, I realized. The interrogator chaplain's consciousness shimmered beside me. He too had projected into the dreamscape. For 10,000 years, Asmodai said, we have hunted the fallen in your name, believing redemption lay in their capture. But the truth, we were the ones who needed redemption. You failed us first, my lord, and we built a lie around your silence. The lion's eyes opened, not in the material, but in the mind. You speak treason, he warned. I speak truth, Asmodai replied. You were a brilliant general, but a terrible father. We have lived in your shadow too long. The lie has to end, even if it kills us. The chamber shook. The psychic pressure threatened to unmake us, but the lion's fury broke, not into rage, into something else. Acceptance. Very well, said the Primarch. I will wake. I will face my sons. I will answer for my choices. His form brightened, light pouring from him like dawn over a dead world. But understand this, he said. If I return, everything changes. The hunt continues, but not the lie. We will face what we are. We will fight with eyes open. That's all we ask, I said softly. Honesty, not perfection. The stasis field began to flicker. Ancient machines groaned to life, stirred by the will of their sleeping master. The air was filled with rising energy. The rock itself began to tremble. We have to go, I told Asmodai. If they detect what's happening, they'll try to stop it. Then I'll make sure they can't, he said. He gathered his psychic power, light building around him like a star about to die. This is my redemption. I've broken too many brothers to preserve lies. Let me break myself to end them. Asmodai, tell him. His form flickered. Tell him I forgive him. And then he detonated. A psychic nova ripped through the rock, shattering null fields, burning circuits and collapsing wards that had stood for millennia. The blast hurled me back into my body. I awoke, gasping, my head pounding, alarms screaming through the fortress, klaxons, running boots, shouting, weapons charging, and beneath it all, a sound I will never forget, a roar. Ancient, primal. The sound of a god awakening after 10,000 years of silence. The lion walked. The walls of my isolation cell exploded inward without warning. The stone that had stood for millennia was reduced to dust by a psychic pressure that defied all known physics. Through the debris, Deathwing Terminators rushed toward my position, storm bolters raised, ready to execute the prisoner before whatever I had done could spread further. But they never reached me. A figure emerged from the depths below, climbing through solid foundations that parted like water before his presence. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall, his ancient power armor still bearing the green of pre-heresy dark angels, though 10,000 years of dust coated its heraldry. Lionel Johnson, first of the Primarchs, Lord of the First Legion, had returned. His face was terrible in its beauty, his eyes blazing with intelligence and fury. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority that transcended all rank. A deep, authoritative voice that cuts through the atmosphere. Stand down, he commanded, and the Terminators froze, their muscles locked by his words. You will not harm this brother. He has done what needed doing. He woke me from cowardice disguised as rest, forced me to face responsibilities I had been avoiding for far too long. One Terminator managed to overcome his paralysis. The Supreme Grandmaster ordered, I am here now. The Lion interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Whatever orders Azrael gave are superseded by my direct command. I am the Chapter Master. I return to find my sons divided by lies and maintained in shame by a doctrine built on incomplete truths. This ends today. He pulled me to my feet with surprising gentleness. Brother Librarian Samael, you have my gratitude for having the courage to challenge me. That took strength few possess. I did only what Luther would have wanted, I replied, finding my voice in the presence of a living demigod. He loved you, my lord. Even at the end, he wanted you to understand rather than simply to destroy. Pain flickered across the lion's features. I know. I felt his death through our psychic connection, felt his final thoughts as the planet shattered. He was not cursing me. He was apologizing, begging me to forgive him for forcing my hand, for not finding another way to make me listen. That was when I knew I had destroyed everything that mattered. He turned to the Deathwing. Take me to the inner circle. I will address them personally, and they will answer for what they have done to my legion, and summon every brother who was confined for seeking the truth about the fall. Heavy, determined footsteps beginning their ascent. As you command, my lord, the sergeant said, saluting. Though I must warn you, if you attempt to reach the sanctum, you will face resistance from brothers who believe you are a warp-spawned imposter. Let them resist, the lion said grimly. It will allow me to see which of my sons values truth over comfortable lies. Come, brother librarian, you will accompany me. We ascended through the rock's passages. With each level, more dark angels joined our procession, some willingly, others dragged along by brothers who recognized their Primarch. But we also encountered those who truly believed the lion was an imposter, brothers so deeply indoctrinated that accepting his return meant accepting that everything they believed was built on lies. The lion did not kill them. He moved through their resistance with the fluid grace of a master duelist, disarming and disabling without permanent harm. With each defeated brother, he paused to confess. I failed Caliban, he told them. I failed Luther. I failed all of you who have been forced to atone for my sins while pretending I was blameless. This ends now. We will hunt the fallen still, but we do it with honest understanding of why they fell, acknowledging that some bore legitimate grievances. By the time we reached the inner circle's sanctum, the doors were sealed by defenses designed to repel a titan. The lion studied them for 3 seconds, then tore them from their moorings with his bare hands. He walked through the torrent of defensive fire, lascannons, bolters, plasma, and emerged into the sanctum, fixing the assembled inner circle with a gaze that could have melted adamantium. Azrael, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. You have done well maintaining the dark angels in my absence. But you have also maintained them in a lie, a comfortable fiction that has poisoned my sons for 10,000 years. Azrael stood at the head of the circle. My Lord Primarch, I must question, how do we know you are truly the lion? A reasonable question, the lion acknowledged. But first I require answers from you. Why have you confined hundreds of brothers for seeking the truth? Why have you activated defensive protocols against your own Primarch? And why have you spent 10 millennia hunting the fallen while refusing to acknowledge the complexity of their fall? Because admitting complexity would destroy us, Azrael replied, his voice raw with honesty. The dark angels are held together by shame and purpose. If we admit that the fall was not simple betrayal, that Luther had legitimate grievances, that you bore some responsibility, then what are we? And you believe that identity is worth maintaining through lies, the lion challenged. I believe it is worth maintaining through careful management of truth, Azrael corrected. Not all brothers can handle the full complexity of our history. Some need simple narratives to function. The lion was silent. I understand your reasoning. It is not so different from my own thinking when I chose to use orbital bombardment rather than face my brothers on Caliban's surface. But I was simply too proud and too ashamed to confront what I had done. He gestured to me and the brothers behind us. These warriors sought truth. They emerged not broken, but strengthened, capable of holding complexity without surrendering to despair. You insult them by assuming they cannot handle the same truths you have borne. Here is my command as returned Primarch of the First Legion. We will declassify the full truth of the fall. Every dark angel will be given access to complete histories. We will acknowledge openly that Luther bore legitimate grievances, that I failed Caliban through my absence. That will tear the chapter apart, protested one inner circle member. Perhaps, the lion agreed, or perhaps they will surprise you with their capacity for nuance and growth. But either way, I will not allow my sons to continue living a lie. 10,000 years of false shame is enough. It ends today. Azrael stepped forward, making a life-defining decision. Then I resign my position as Supreme Grand Master. If you choose to overturn 10 millennia of tradition and doctrine, I cannot be part of it. I accept your resignation, the lion said sadly. He looked around the sanctum. Who among you will stand with me? Who is willing to lead the Dark Angels into a new age, one built on honest acknowledgement of our past? I stepped forward without hesitation. I will, my lord. I have seen what honesty can accomplish. If the Dark Angels are to survive, we must adapt, we must evolve. Others followed, and the inner circle divided. The lion moved to the center of the sanctum, and his psychic presence expanded, broadcasting through the genetic connection to every Dark Angel mind in the galaxy. I am Lionel Johnson, and I have awakened. I have been absent for 10,000 years. I have allowed you to hunt the fallen without understanding why they fell. This ends now. We become what we should have been from the beginning, warriors wise enough to admit their flaws. The wheel had finally turned. The truth had finally emerged. Now we would see if the Dark Angels could survive it. 3 days after the lion's awakening, I stood in the observation dome of the rock, staring into the void. Behind me, the fortress monastery stirred like a living thing. Construction crews reshaped chambers for their Primarch. Logistics officers tore apart entire supply chains. And everywhere brothers argued, some with joy, others with fury. The chapter was fracturing, not into loyalists and rebels, but into dozens of smaller creeds, each brother interpreting the lion's words in his own way. Some embraced the truth as liberation. Others called the lion a heretic, or worse, an impostor. Most stood in between, struggling to hold both faith and doubt at once. Brother Librarian, I turned to find a young scout, nervous and breathless. The lion requests your presence, urgent. I followed him through corridors still being rebuilt to fit a being larger than myth. The lion had claimed Azrael's former quarters, stripped bare, austere, illuminated only by the stars beyond. He stood before the viewport, still as stone. Without turning, he spoke. Do you see it? He gestured toward the debris field where the Perdition Moon orbited among Caliban's remains. I enhanced my sight and froze. The moon pulsed with green light. Other fragments around it glowed the same, as if veins of life ran through the ruins of our home. Caliban is waking, the lion said softly, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. Not echoes, he continued, but the planetary soul itself, reassembling, remembering me. It calls to us through our blood. What does it want? I asked, though part of me already knew. Reconciliation, he said. It wants me to admit what I did, that my choices destroyed it, that every death since traces back to me. He turned at last, and I saw vulnerability on that perfect, ageless face. I have conquered worlds, he whispered, but this, admitting my failures before those I failed most, this terrifies me more than war ever did. Then don't do it alone, I said. Bring the chapter to the Perdition Moon. Let us face Caliban together. Family shares the burdens too heavy for one. The lion studied me, then nodded slowly. If I do this, some may fall. The forest's song is strong. Some may, I said, but most will endure. You made us strong. Trust that. For the first time he smiled, small, real, human. Within the hour, the order went out. All Dark Angels in the system were to assemble. Every ship, every squad, every brother. We would face Caliban's ghost together. 2 days of uneasy preparation followed. Brothers once divided, worked side by side. The chapter reshaped itself before my eyes, forged anew in tension and hope. Even Asmodai, burned out and broken, was called upon for counsel. The lion said we would need his perspective if our hunt was to continue with honesty. On the third day, we descended. Thunderhawks split the sky. Drop pods rained like meteors. Thousands of dark angels made planetfall on a world that should have been dead, but now thrived with impossible life. Forests covered every inch. Among them stood cathedrals of living wood, their branches woven into towers and vaults that touched the clouds. The lion led us toward the greatest of them, a vast structure grown from ironwood trees. Its sap-glass windows shimmered with shifting scenes from Caliban's past. And there, at the altar's heart, stood Luther, not an echo, not a ghost, alive, whole, restored by the planet that remembered him. "Johnson," he breathed, "you came. After 10,000 years, you came." The lion halted 10 meters away and the air trembled between them. "I came," he said, "because I was a coward for too long. Because pride kept me from facing what I had done. Because my sons deserve truth." Luther laughed, half joy, half pain. "I never wanted vengeance, Johnson. Only for you to understand, everything I did was to make you see what your absence was costing Caliban." The lion's voice broke. "I see it now. If I had balanced duty with compassion, if I had listened instead of commanded, Caliban might still live, and we might still be brothers." Luther wept, his form flickering with light. "I'm sorry," he said, "for raising weapons, for forcing your hand." "And I am sorry," the lion answered, "for mistaking obedience for wisdom. We both failed, and we both have suffered enough." He reached out, and Luther became solid beneath his hand. The two men, divided for 10 millennia, embraced. Around us, the sons of the First Legion, hardened warriors all, wept openly. "I forgive you," the lion said, his voice amplified through the cathedral. "For rebellion, for Caliban, for everything." Luther smiled through his tears. "I forgave you long ago. The only one who never did was you." The cathedral shuddered as Caliban's consciousness surged through its roots. Visions appeared in the sap-glass, dark angels and fallen fighting side by side. The hunt transformed into redemption, the lion leading his legion openly once more, and Caliban reborn, not as a planet, but as a living mind, guiding its sons through the stars. "These are possibilities," Luther said, "not prophecies, gifts. The past is unchangeable. The future is still yours to write." The lion nodded. "Then we write it together." And then, from the entrance of the cathedral came a new voice. Calm, cold, inevitable. "A touching scene," it said, "but you forget one thing." Every head turned. A hooded figure stood in the doorway, sword and pistol in hand. Behind him, 100 fallen, their armor marked by a dozen war bands. "Cipher. Truth," he said, stepping forward, "does not make us loyal. Understanding does not erase 10,000 years of being hunted like animals. Forgiveness does not bring back the brothers you murdered." He stopped at the edge of the light, his eyes fixed on the lion. "You speak of reconciliation," he said quietly. "But tell me, Johnson, why should we trust you?" The cathedral fell silent as Cypher's voice echoed through the living wood. The lion's hand moved to his blade, but Luther stopped him. "He's right," Luther said. "We speak of forgiveness, yet we offer no proof. Words mean nothing to those who've lived our hypocrisy." Cypher stepped forward, surrounded by his fallen, faces hidden, weapons ready but lowered. "I have watched you for 10,000 years, he said. "Torturers masquerading as confessors, executioners are calling it redemption. And now, after 3 days with your Primarch, you expect belief." The lion's gaze didn't waver. "I expect you to test us." Cypher inclined his head, the faintest of smiles behind his cowl. "Then let there be a trial, not of steel, but of memory. Let your sons feel what we endured." Luther stiffened. "You would use Caliban's consciousness to share the fallen's memories." "Precisely. Let the hunters remember being hunted." Outrage erupted from the ranks. Protests, denials, oaths of purity. The lion raised a hand, and silence followed like gravity. "I accept," he said. "Every dark angel present will witness the truth. If our righteousness is genuine, it will survive your memories. If not, then perhaps it deserves to break." Samael's voice cut through the tension. "My lord, if these are lies—" "I will know," said the lion. "The blood of Caliban runs through us all. The truth will not hide from me." Cypher's expression shifted, not trust, but interest. "Very well. Luther, begin." The old warrior raised his hands. The cathedral trembled. Green light surged through the walls as Caliban's consciousness awoke once more. And the world vanished. I became Brother Malachi, standing on Caliban's surface as the lion's ships appeared in orbit. We sent hails. No reply. Then fire fell from the heavens. I felt his panic, his disbelief, his final breath under collapsing stone, his dying thought not hate, but hope that his Primarch would someday understand. The vision shifted. I was Theona, a librarian from the Legion's earliest days, hunted not for treachery, but for questioning why her home had been annihilated. Captured, interrogated, she begged to serve again, to prove loyalty. The blade that ended her life was wielded by a brother, whispering unforgiven. More memories came, endless running, hiding on hive worlds and agri moons, hunted by kin who refused to listen. The fear of every footstep behind you being your executioner. The bitterness of killing demons and heretics in secret, only to die by the hands of your own chapter. And the worst truth of all, that most of them still fought for the Imperium, even while being branded a traitor. When the visions broke, I was on my knees. The cathedral was filled with silence, then sobs, screams, and whispered prayers. Every dark angel had lived the hunt through the eyes of the hunted. "This is what we did," the lion said, voice rough with shame. "Not out of malice, but out of cowardice. We called it penance, but it was denial. We became the monsters we feared." Asmodee's voice, weak, defiant, rose from the crowd. "Some of those memories were lies. We did offer redemption. We killed only to stop corruption." "Memory is imperfect," Cypher admitted, "but pain doesn't lie. You hunted us without mercy. You never asked why we fell." The lion turned to him. "Then I accept that blame. I began this pattern. When I chose bombardment over words, I doomed my sons to repeat my sin." He drew his blade and knelt, a Primarch, kneeling before a son. "I, Lionel Johnson, accept full responsibility. I confess my failure, my pride, my blindness. I ask, not demand, for the chance to make amends, to create a path where loyalty and redemption are not opposites." The cathedral froze. A Primarch's confession had enough weight to bend reality itself. Cypher was motionless. Then, slowly, he reached out and took the blade by its edge. "I cannot forgive for all the fallen," he said, "but I can witness this. You have done what no demigod has ever done, admitted fault. That is a beginning." He reversed the blade and offered it back, hilt first. "I will tell the fallen what I saw. Some will listen, others will spit on your name, but the truth will spread." The lion rose. "Then help me finish this. Help me hunt those who truly serve chaos, not those who are only lost." Cypher considered. "Then, 2 conditions. First, a trial for every fallen captured. Not confession by pain, but judgment by evidence. Second, the inner circle's archives must be opened. Every secret, every execution, every lie." The lion nodded without hesitation. "Done. The hunt will continue, but with justice, not shame. The inner circle ends today. No more shadows." Azrael's voice broke the silence. "The Imperium will learn everything. The Inquisition will come. We could lose all we have built." "Then we lose it," said the lion. "Better to fall with truth than stand on lies. Let the Imperium judge us as we truly are." The ground shuddered. The living cathedral responded, its walls reshaping, its light softening. Caliban itself seemed content. Visions formed across the walls, dark angels and fallen fighting side by side. The lion leading a reborn legion, other Primarchs awakening to find the first had already faced its sins and darker futures, civil war, excommunication, ruin. The future is fluid, Luther said. Caliban shows possibilities, not certainties. Then we choose well, said the lion. We move forward with caution, but we move. No more lies. He turned to me. Brother librarian, you began this. What is our first act on this new path? I looked upon the moon that had become Caliban's soul, upon brothers scarred by truth yet standing. A memorial, I said. Here, every dark angel and every fallen who died in the hunt, together. No divisions, no lies. The lion nodded. A monument to truth. Luther. The floor cracked. From the stone rose pillars inscribed with names, thousands of them glowing faintly in green light. Names of heroes, names of traitors, names of brothers. For the first time, the two lists were the same. And as the light of Caliban filled the hall, I felt something shift deep within my gene seed, an old weight dissolving. For the first time in 10,000 years, the First Legion was not unforgiven. They were becoming forgiven. The memorial took 7 days to complete, though on the Perdition Moon, time had lost its meaning. Day and night flickered without rhythm, as if Caliban's reborn spirit could no longer remember how rotation worked. During that strange week, dark angels and fallen labored side by side. For the first time in 10,000 years, they worked not as enemies, but as brothers. Luther's ghost guided them. The lion watched in silence, and slowly, the hatred that had defined the Legion began to soften. But not all accepted the new order. Some dark angels departed within days, claiming the lion had been corrupted, or that Luther's return was proof of sorcery. They left without bloodshed, but their absence carved holes in the ranks that no words could fill. Azrael remained, though distant, watching, not participating. I found him alone on the third day, standing at the edge of Caliban's ghostly forest, staring at the debris that once was his homeworld. "Do you hate me?" I asked. "For waking the lion? For destroying the chapter you built?" He was silent for a long time. Then, "I should. By every measure of doctrine, I should call you a heretic and demand your death. But I can't. Because of this, what the lion has begun, it feels true in a way our lies never did." He turned, and I saw centuries of exhaustion in his face. I lived my life maintaining secrets I thought sacred. I tortured myself with truths I could not share. Now I learn it was all unnecessary, that transparency might have saved us sooner. How do I live with that? By facing it, I said. The lion dreamed of the fall for 10,000 years. He saw every mistake, every choice that led to ruin. But he woke anyway. Maybe you can do the same. Azrael nodded slowly. Perhaps. But I cannot serve this new doctrine. I am shaped by the old ways. I will not oppose the lion, but I cannot follow him either. I will lead a crusade fleet, continue the hunt as it once was. That's schism, I warned. It's honesty, he said. Better open division than false unity. Two doctrines, both loyal to the emperor. Let every warrior choose. I wanted to argue, but I remembered the visions Caliban had shown us. Forced unity always led to ruin. Perhaps this too was part of healing. On the 7th day, the memorial stood complete. A forest of stone columns inscribed with countless names, glowing with Caliban's living light. At its heart rose 2 statues, carved from a single ironwood trunk, the lion and Luther, standing back to back, guarding each other's blind spots. It was the bond they should have shared all along. That evening, the lion summoned every soul to witness the dedication. Amber light filled the cathedral as Caliban's ichor flowed through the stone like molten fire. "We stand," said the lion, "at the end of 10,000 years of shame and the beginning of whatever future we earn." These names are not symbols of loyalty or betrayal. They are men, each making impossible choices in impossible times. He gestured toward the pillars. Some chose wisely, some foolishly. All paid the price of my failure. A voice rose from the shadows. Do not pretend all the fallen were victims. Figures emerged from the dark, armor twisted, eyes burning with warp fire. Their leader's laughter filled the air like the sound of cracking bone. Marbus, Cypher hissed, once of the Legion, now slave to Khorne. Marbus spread his arms, chaos sigils glowing across his armor. Reconciliation, redemption, weak words for weak men. I come bearing truth. Some of us found freedom in chaos, power, purpose. You have gathered your enemies in one place, and chaos thanks you. He raised his sword, warp energy writhing along its edge. I bring war. I will burn your memorial, shatter your moon, and scatter Caliban's spirit back into the void. Then come, the lion said, voice like thunder. Come and test yourself against brothers who finally remember who they are. Unity built on truth is stronger than division built on lies. Marbus smiled, revealing serrated teeth. We shall see, old king. He dissolved into smoke. The stench of sulfur lingered. The crowd erupted in panic, but the lion raised a hand. Now you see why the hunt continues, he said. Not all who fell can be redeemed. Some embrace damnation willingly. These we must destroy, not for shame, but for duty. He turned, eyes sweeping over dark angels and fallen alike. Marbus comes for us with the strength of the damned. I ask you now, will you stand together? Will you fight beside those you once hunted? Will you trust brothers who gave you every reason not to? For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Cypher stepped forward. In his hands gleamed the lion sword, the weapon he had carried for 10 millennia. I will stand, he said, not because all is forgiven, but because Marbus would see this hope extinguished. If he wins, the last chance for truth dies. I will not let that happen. One by one, others joined him. Not all, many still turned away, but enough to form a new army. Fallen and dark angels side by side, uncertain but resolute. The lion's voice carried over the assembly. Then we fortify this world. Use the forests, they will obey. Prepare every weapon. Chaos comes for us, and this time we meet it together. He looked at me. Brother librarian, work with Luther. Raise psychic wards. If Marbus brings demons, I want this moon sealed. Luther's ghost shimmered beside me as I began the ritual. Caliban can defend, he warned, but only once. To unleash its full power would destroy everything we've built. Then we hold the line, I said. We prove truth is not weakness. Together we wove the wards, psychic light wrapping the moon in a shield of memory and faith. But through the warp, I could already feel them coming. Marbus's fleet, vast and corrupted, burning toward us through unreality. Demonic engines, warships of rusted iron, 10,000 fallen, twisted beyond salvation. They'll be here by dawn, I reported. We are outnumbered 3-1. Then we make numbers irrelevant, said the lion. Marbus expects a divided legion. He will find a united one. Night fell over Perdition. I took my place in the defense lines, flanked by dark angels and fallen alike. And as the first drop pods streaked through the atmosphere, I felt something I had not known in centuries. Clarity. I was no longer fighting for secrecy, not for shame, not even for redemption. I was fighting for the truth, for the dream that the unforgiven could become whole again, for Caliban, for home. The assault began with fire from the heavens. Orbital bombardment rained down on the Perdition Moon, great shells meant to scour the surface to molten glass. But instead of ruin, they struck against green fire. Caliban's psychic shields, born from the living forests and the planet's very soul. The moon was fighting back. Each impact weakened the wards. The strain of maintaining atmosphere, vegetation, and defense against chaos was tearing Caliban's spirit apart. We had hours, perhaps less, before the shields failed entirely. "Drop pods inbound," came the call from the Raven Wing. "Eastern perimeter, 2,000 hostiles in the first wave." The Lion's voice answered across the Vox, calm and absolute. "Let them land. We hold the prepared lines. Librarians, maintain psychic watch. If they summon demons, I want a warning before they manifest." I reached into the warp and recoiled. Dozens of chaos sorcerers were tearing holes in reality, feeding the assault. Yet they were resisted not by our wards alone, but by something older, Caliban itself. The forests remembered what they had been before corruption, pure, untainted. They wove those memories into psychic barriers, confusing the demons, choking their advance with recollection of innocence. The planet was fighting for its children. The forests resist them, I reported, but the enemy sorcerers adapt. Their coordination must be broken. The Lion turned to Cypher. "You know their kind. How do we undo them?" The hooded warrior stepped forward. "Pride. Chaos sorcerers cooperate only when it serves them. Plant a seed of doubt and their unity dies. I can do it if I have psychic support." The Lion nodded. "Take what you need. Librarian Samael will anchor you. Break their circle." Within the memorial's heart, Cypher removed his hood. His face was ancient, yet untouched by time. "Anchor me," he said quietly. "If I lose myself in the warp, pull me back. No matter what happens." I opened my mind, linking our psyches. His spirit shot outward like a blade through the void until we both stood, disembodied, within the enemy flagship. The ship was a nightmare of metal and flesh. 7 sorcerers chanted in unison, rending reality with every word. Cypher appeared among them, unseen, and whispered into their thoughts with the cold precision of a serpent. "The ritual fails because Marbas betrays you. He takes more power than his share. Look, his quadrant burns brighter. His demons come forth while yours falter. A lie, but a perfect one. Chaos breeds paranoia, and their harmony was shattered instantly. Accusations, rage, psychic backlash, then slaughter. Demons half-born were torn apart as their summoners turned on one another." Cypher's consciousness snapped back into his body. He staggered, exhausted. "It's done," he said. "Their unity is broken. Their demons will come disordered, leaderless." Moments later, the first wave of corrupted warriors hit our defenses. They came screaming the names of their false gods, armor warped, eyes aflame, but we held the line. Dark angels and fallen fought side by side, moving with an instinct that transcended millennia of division. Where one faltered, another covered him. When one fell, both loyal and lost dragged him to safety. It was not unity born of forgiveness, but of necessity. Caliban fought with us, roots tore through enemy lines, trees struck from above like the fists of gods, yet the tide pressed on. For every corrupted warrior slain, 2 more emerged from the smoke. "We're breaking!" Samael's voice roared over Vox. "Eastern line collapsing. We need to fall back to the cathedral." "Negative," the Lion replied. "If we abandon the forests, Caliban dies. Hold. Then we need reinforcements, my lord." A pause. Then the Lion asked quietly, "How many fallen remain in stasis?" "Hundreds, perhaps thousands," I answered, "but after 10,000 years asleep." "Wake them," he said. "Give them the choice. Tell them their Primarch calls and will accept whatever answer they give." Luther's voice rose from the forest like wind through ironwood leaves. "Some will fight for you. Some are against you. You offer them truth, and truth brings chaos." "So be it," said the Lion. "Wake them." Power surged through Caliban's core. The cathedral shook as stasis fields broke. One by one, the fallen awoke, confused, screaming, weeping, and fighting. Some joined us instantly, others hesitated or attacked, believing the sight of fallen beside loyalists a heresy too deep to comprehend. The battlefield dissolved into chaos within chaos. "This is what you wanted," Asmodai snarled. "Brother against brother." "This," the Lion answered, "is the cost of honesty." And yet he was right. The majority rose to fight beside us, their presence overwhelming the chaos forces. Where moments before we faced extinction, Now the tide has turned. Caliban itself seemed to roar in triumph. Trees struck down fleeing heretics. The earth swallowed those who tried to retreat. The air thickened around the enemy while we moved through it as though carried by unseen wings. Victory, sudden and terrible, began to bloom. Then he came, Marbas. He strode onto the field wreathed in warp fire, his form swollen with demonic power until he loomed like a dark god. "Lion!" he roared. "Face me!" Blade to blade. The lion emerged from the cathedral, armor scorched but unbowed. "You want a duel?" he called. "If you fall, your forces surrender. If I fall, the hunt resumes. Do you accept?" Marbas smiled. "Gladly." The forests themselves parted, forming an arena. The two giants met in silence, broken only by the impact of their blades, each strike a thunderclap, each parry a quake. 17 minutes. That was all it took for the gods to decide the fate of men. Marbas lunged, too far, too fast. The lion countered with perfect precision. His blade swept through the corrupted champion's neck in one fluid motion. The head fell, the body collapsed. The demon within fled howling back to the warp. "It's over," the lion declared. "All chaos forces surrender or be destroyed. The fallen who have not turned to corruption are granted amnesty. The Emperor's mercy extends to all who still remember their oaths." And slowly, impossibly, the guns fell silent. The corrupted laid down their arms. Some fought to the death, and we granted it. But many surrendered, broken, uncertain of what came next. The sun rose over Caliban's scarred forests, bathing the battlefield in gold and green. The cost was immense, hundreds dead, forests scorched, Caliban's spirit dimmed, yet we had held. The memorial stood. For the first time in 10,000 years, dark angels and fallen stood together, not as enemies, but as brothers. It was not redemption, it was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning is enough. The aftermath of battle is always worse than the fight itself. In war, there is direction, purpose. In its wake, only silence remains. The cataloguing of the dead, the tending of the wounded, the reckoning with what's been lost. 3 days after Marbas fell, I walked the forests of Caliban's moon. We searched among the ruins, identifying the fallen, recording names for the memorial. Many of the newly awakened had lived for only hours before dying again, reborn just long enough to fight and fall once more. "It seems cruel," I said. "They died with purpose," Mordred replied, closing the eyes of a nameless brother. "They woke knowing who they were and why they fought. That's more than most ever get." I asked him if it was enough. He looked at me and said quietly, "It's more than Luther got." Since the battle's end, I had not felt Luther's psychic presence. Caliban's consciousness remained, but the individual spirit that was Luther seemed gone, absorbed into the world he had protected for millennia. "Do you think he's truly gone?" I asked. "Does it matter?" Mordred said. "He spent 10,000 years preparing us to face the truth without him. Now we must." We continued our grim work in silence. The forest around us still bore scars from the fighting, trees charred by plasma, bark split and bleeding green ichor. And yet new growth pushed through the blackened soil. Caliban's spirit was healing itself. That was where I found Ezekiel, kneeling before one of the wounded trees, hands pressed to its bark. Psychic energy pulsed from him into the living wood. "Brother librarian," he said without opening his eyes, "come to check on me or to ask what comes next?" "Both," I admitted. "The lion fears you've been compromised." Ezekiel laughed softly. "Compromised? Number. Enlightened, perhaps. I've been speaking with Caliban for 72 hours, and I finally understand. The planet was always sentient, not in our way, but aware. It raised the lion, protected him, and loved him. When he left to join the Emperor, it wasn't the world that betrayed him. He betrayed it." "That's what Luther claimed," I said. Ezekiel nodded. Perhaps both were right. The lion served unity. Luther defended the home. Caliban tried to protect its children. All righteous, all flawed. That's the truth of our fall. He rose. the green light of Caliban's ichor flickering in his eyes. Caliban doesn't want revenge, he said. It wants its children to be whole, to stop tearing themselves apart over shared sins. Can we do that? I asked. Some can, some won't, but the lion understands now. He no longer demands blind unity. He allows belief to coexist. We walked together toward the great cathedral. The lion stood there, repairing the memorial with his own hands, recarving names lost to weapon fire, each letter etched with perfect precision. "My lord," Ezekiel called, "I bring revelations the old inner circle would have buried." "Speak," the lion said. Ezekiel drew a long breath. "Caliban did not die when you bombarded it. A world's consciousness cannot die so easily. It was shattered, its mind scattered across 1,000 fragments drifting through the void. Each fragment retained a memory, a sliver of awareness. For 10,000 years they've tried to reconnect, using us, their children, as conduits. The genetic memory we thought was a curse was Caliban trying to remember itself." The lion's voice was low. "Then I did not just destroy a world. I shattered a living being." "Yes," Ezekiel said. "Luther spent millennia holding the pieces together. You did not fail politically, my lord. You attempted deicide." The lion sank to the memorial steps, the weight of revelation crushing him. For the first time, he looked mortal. "How do I make amends for that?" he whispered. "You don't," said a voice from behind. Cypher stepped from the shadows of the cathedral. "You can't undo 10,000 years of pain. You can only stop adding to it. I've carried your sword all this time, thinking the Emperor would grant us redemption. But I see now, the Emperor doesn't care about our guilt. Only Caliban does." The lion looked up. "Then what do you propose?" "Stay," Cypher said simply. "Not forever, but long enough to help heal what you broke. Let the forest teach you, as they taught Luther, that love and duty can coexist." "And the Legion?" the lion asked. "They adapt," I said, understanding before I knew the words. "Samael leads those who embrace your new doctrine. Azrael leads those who follow the old hunt. Both serve you. Both are free to follow conscience. The First Legion becomes what it was meant to be, diverse, self-aware, united by purpose, not guilt." The lion considered, then nodded. "Very well. I will remain here for 1 Terran year. During that time, Samael commands the reformed host, Azrael, and the traditionalists. Afterward, I will judge their progress." He looked to Ezekiel. "We will not hide the truth again, not from ourselves, nor from our sons." Ezekiel bowed. "That is all Caliban asks, not perfection, only honesty. To stop fleeing from our own reflection." The lion's gaze turned toward the horizon, the forests whispering in the wind. "Then I will try. This will be harder than any war I have fought. Facing oneself always is." In the days that followed, he began his work. He walked the forests daily, listening, not commanding, speaking to Caliban's spirit in humility, asking forgiveness not with words, but with presence. He learned that true strength is not never erring, but having the courage to admit when you have. That redemption is not erasure, but understanding. And that perhaps the Dark Angels could finally become something more than unforgiven, not because we earned forgiveness, but because we stopped begging for it and simply chose to be better. 3 weeks after the Lion's communion with Caliban, the New Order faced its first test. A distress call, reports of fallen angels bearing Dark Angels heraldry attacking Imperial outposts. Tradition demanded extermination without question, but this was a new era. Grandmaster Samael convened a council, loyalists and reformed fallen alike, gathered within the cathedral's ironwood strategy chamber. "Intelligence identifies the leader," Samael said. "Maria, once captain of the 3rd Company, vanished during the fall. No signs of Chaos allegiance until now." Cypher leaned forward. "Maria was no traitor. He was caught in the Caliban when it burned. If he's attacking Imperials, there's purpose behind it." A young angel snarled. "Purpose? Every fallen claims justification. We cannot trust words from those who abandoned the lion. Mordred's voice cut through the tension. Then perhaps we listen before we kill. Investigate. If he's corrupted, we act. If not, we might learn something that strengthens us. Debate erupted. Tradition versus transformation. Suspicion versus redemption. Samael listened in silence, weighing every word. Finally, he decided, we split our force. A small delegation will parley, myself, Ezekiel, Cypher, 2 guards. The rest will stand ready should diplomacy fail. Someone hissed, "That's suicide!" The battle isn't over yet, brothers. The rest of the story continues in our next episode. Stay vigilant and prepare for what comes from the void. Subscribe and await the next transmission.